Yes. Yes. Guess what, Jackson?
Ooh. What's that, Tim?
I won it.
Yes.
I'm kind of loaded for bear. I don't feel like an hour is enough, actually. I got all kinds of stuff. I don't know what you have, but I know what I've got, and I've got a variety of thoughts. We have this Ken Rosenthal audio I'm looking forward to playing. I was just discussing with Matt Rocchio, Randy Carrick. Randy, I remember this. The morning of the announcement of the Cardinals signing Sonny Gray, what his perspective was. And, Randy has been right on target. So I'll tip my cap there. Talk about that. College football's top 10. Missouri not included, but they are included in the top 25 because they're number 11. Fight Tiger. And the Cardinals losing last night to the Reds. Jackson has a series of questions. What are those called?
Good Pid, Mad City.
Good Pid, Mad City.
Yep.
And the Blues this morning making a big move. A potentially intriguing development here. Jackson, if you could tell the audience about Philip Broberg of the Edmonton Oilers, who received an offer sheet from the Blues, along with Holloway, and what you think this move means and what the Blues and Doug Armstrong are trying to do.
It seems to me, defender. This guy he's a D-man. But more than that, he's a puckman. He knows...
excuse me, I'm sorry?
A puckman? That's what... I talked last year a lot about spacing and the need for spacing. The ice is only so big, so let's space it out as best as we can. And this guy, he's really talented at spacing out the ice, understanding his position, awareness of not only his body but his stick. You're not going to catch this guy in the sin bin for getting high sticking. That's not what he does. He
avoids high sticking penalties? That's why the Blues liked him?
He avoids high sticking, but he doesn't avoid the hard areas. And that's why he's a real grit. He's a real grind kind of guy. I think he'll play very well here in St. Louis. I think the fans will really find him endearing. I think his play is going to be just top tier. So another great move by Army, and I've always been a big Blues supporter.
Now, of course, he may not be in St. Louis.
Edmonton can match.
And how long do they have to match?
They get a week. They have a week. Mike Ryder tried putting his hands up to give me a hint, but I wouldn't allow it because I'm a puckman myself, right. And I know this. But Edmonton, it's so far up north there that they're preparing for the winter, so I can't imagine they'll be too concerned with matching. They're like, hey,
hold on a second, because here on August...
today's August 13th.
On August 13th, they are preparing for the winter in Edmonton, and therefore they're going to forget to match the offer?
Sometimes I forget I'm not talking to a fellow puckman. I don't know if you're aware how north Edmonton is in Canada.
So once August rolls around, they bat down the hatches and say, we'll see you next May.
August, you have a good headway on what's going to come this winter. It's going to be a cold one. They know it. And so they're preparing for that. Hockey takes, August is when they're focusing on the winter. They'll get to hockey in October when they're already set up.
All right, fair enough. Well, there it is. This is what Jeremy Rutherford, not as informed as Jackson,
Thank you.
has. He's going to join BK and Ferrario coming up, by the way. Blues general manager Doug Armstrong hinted at the possibility of signing restricted free agents from outside the organization to an offer sheet this offseason. And he's followed through on that. The Blues tendered offer sheets to Oilers defenseman Philip Broberg and forward Dylan Holloway this morning. Edmonton will have a week per Jackson Burkett, so he cites you there.
Did JR cite me? Thank you.
Yeah. Edmonton will have a week to match the offers. If not, the players will become members of the Blues. Armstrong said earlier in the summer that the Blues have the salary cap space to take advantage of a team in a cap crunch. The Oilers are about $400,000 over the NHL's $88 million cap for the upcoming season. The moves are also in line with what the organization has been saying about adding players in a younger age bracket during its retool. So, along those lines, the offer to Broberg's for a 2-year deal at $4.5 million per year. The maximum offer that will require a second-round draft pick as compensation. According to the league's collective bargaining agreement, the offer to Holloway is a 2-year contract at $2.2 million per year. The maximum offer that will require a third-round draft pick as compensation. So in conjunction, the Blues traded with the Penguins to acquire the necessary draft picks to facilitate the deal with Edmonton. Was talking with some people during TMA when this news broke. I cite this gentleman often on the program. Kevin Lorenz is his name. He worked with us on TMA for a few years. And he said it's a great strategy to accelerate a rebuild, and that's why they kept all that cap space. Thinking back to the slow open free agency and the premium they paid to move Kevin Hayes, it made this possible. Edmonton's expected to put Evander Kane on LTIR, but if they match both offers, they'd still be $2 million or so over the cap. So there's significant pressure on an Edmonton team that needs to continue to compete. Not sure if this is about both players or if it's a strategic move to pry Broberg out. Broberg has late bloomer in a bad situation potential, so he could fit as a partner for Parayko. Holloway would be ready to jump into the top 9 as a forward who can produce. Blues, I believe, are at their contract limit, so if they get one or both players, corresponding moves would have to happen. I don't believe they'd get a second buyout window. I'm not up to date on those rules, so that's something to monitor. Edmonton, again, 7 days to match. It would cost a second-round pick for Broberg, third-rounder for Holloway, pennies on the dollar for both, and these contracts are pretty in line. Edmonton put themselves in a bad situation with the cap, but as we've seen, that's the cost of keeping a cup window open. So there it is this morning, something to monitor. And this, I can't help but do this, but this it fits into the discussion that up until this move was made about an hour ago, or announced an hour ago. It's a clear contrast to me in why people buy into the Blues, even though the Blues haven't had great years the last couple of years, and people why treat the Cardinals with skepticism. And you'd go, well, what? I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen. These guys might stay in Edmonton. But it's the foresight to make a play that is taking advantage of a situation for a franchise that you recognize they have a weakness. The weakness isn't necessarily what they have on the ice. They got a hell of a team. They're a win away from winning the cup. It's their cap situation. And Doug Armstrong said earlier, and Jeremy Rutherford has this quote on his Twitter timeline this morning. In June, he said, there's a perception that offer sheets are taboo by managers. Offer sheets that don't work are taboo by managers. That's the assessment we all make. I think teams are more than willing to at least explore that now. The cap has gone up, but a lot of that money has already been spent by the team. So if you have a restricted free agent that's in an uncomfortable spot, it's at least my job responsibility to assess, is that an option that we should explore? And as we see, the answer was yes. So what the Blues do is, yeah, they're in a tough spot, and they got some bad contracts, and Doug Armstrong's not absolved from that because we like other moves and a cup championship in 2019. But just because you're backed into a tough spot, you don't go, oh, well, let's see what we can get. You make moves to try and continue on a path with the plan that you have had as your North Star. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, on the other side of things, frustrate the fan base with holding to a plan that may not be working. And as things play out last night, I was so looking forward to watching that game, Jackson. Mm-hmm. Jordan Walker.
Navy caps.
Navy caps, you're exactly right. I don't know which one was more important. Mm-hmm. And my goodness, just lifeless. Yeah. And it's a Sonny Gray start. And you know, I was saying this on TMA to Doug Vaughn, and maybe there's another pitcher people can think of. I don't think there are too many pitchers that I can think of in baseball who can carve up a team and shut down a team like Sonny Gray can, with both the strikeouts and shutting them down as far as their ceiling goes. But with regard to the floor, he can have these kinds of outings. Like he had a brutal July. And you're going, okay, is he righted the ship? Is he righted the ship? And then you go out there and you get worked over by the Reds.
Yeah.
And then, of course, no offense as Abbott shuts him down, the lefty. And the Cardinals went like damn near across the board as right-handed as they could, and it still didn't matter.
Yeah, as much as I'm in agreement with you on Sonny with the high ceiling, low floor thing, we've seen that more so over the last 6 weeks than all this entire season. When you start out striking out 7 of the first 9 and then proceed to give up 3 homers for a total of 6 earned runs, it's like it's the same pitcher on the mound, but what's the difference here? And back-to-back pitches up and in on Steer and De La Cruz that they just took downtown. Like, it's so strange with Sonny Gray, but no matter what, giving up 6 runs or not, if you score 1 run in the baseball game at Great American Ballpark against the Cincinnati Reds, you're not going to win many baseball games. And again, if a lefty's on the mound, the Cardinals they're just useless, and it's so frustrating to watch.
They are now a game above 500. They're facing one of the better pitchers over the last 6 weeks. Hunter Green has been on a tear.
Yeah, at least he's a righty.
And the Cardinals, if that does not work out, there will be one team in the National League Central above 500. The Cardinals are now just a game and a half up on the Cubs, 2 games up on the Reds, and my Pirates bet to win the National League and the World Series looks like I've lit money on fire.
Yeah, that's the only offense.
I've still got the Cardinals to win the National League and the Cardinals to win the World Series, and the flame is starting to get lit on that one as well. The Pirates offense is the one that's next to the Cardinals because we don't recognize the Marlins. The Cardinals have scored 493 runs. The Pirates have scored 494. Other than that, everybody in the National League has scored at least 500, minus the Marlins, who we do not recognize. Maybe it gives you solace to know that the White Sox have only scored 379 runs.
Here's Derek Gould put up a great stat today in his article. The Cardinals have the 4th most at-bats in the majors against lefties this season, and they have the 4th fewest home runs against lefties. Like, it's just... I don't get what it is, but if a lefty takes a mound, they are Sandy Koufax against the Cardinals.
And the thing is, because if you get to the core, and we're going to play this sound from Ken Rosenthal coming up, if you get to the core of the Cardinals going into the 2023 season, okay, so let's take ourselves back to March 2023, because we were not, I recall what we were talking about. We were not talking about the offense. Why would we? Got Arenado and Goldschmidt coming off of an MVP and a top finish in the MVP together. Yeah. You have Jordan Walker, ranked number 1 prospect in baseball, and you have Wilson Contreras beginning his time in St. Louis. So if anything, you're thinking, oh, we got a bunch of right-handed bats, some big-time right-handed bats, left-handed pitching. Who really cares? So, and I want to make this very clear. This is not absolving ownership. This is not absolving John Mozeliak. This is not absolving Ali Marmol. But I don't necessarily think you can blame those guys individually for the collective performance of these players over the last couple of years, specifically Goldschmidt, Arenado, and Walker. Walker gets called up. We were discussing that on the show yesterday. I was thrilled to see it. He had a great first at bat. He fell behind 0-2 and then worked his way with some discipline to a walk, giving the Cardinals an opportunity, of which they had a couple with the bases loaded, but did not convert. If you have those guys performing well below what their expectations would be, I don't care what team you are, that's going to be problematic. It's really problematic when one is under contract for a number of years in Arenado, and another is the number 1 ranked prospect, and he spent more time in Memphis than he has St. Louis since that time. But when you sit there and you go, man, these guys are right-handed hitters, and yet the Cardinals are having their core issues with left-handers, and it continues to torture the team. They now sit 7.5 back as the Brewers lost last night, but another day clicks off the calendar with regard to the National League Central, and they are 2.5 back of the 3rd place wild card spot, 6.5 back of both the 1st and 2nd wild card spot. And keep in mind, the Mets and the Giants are right there with them, and now the Cubs are only a game and a half back, but the Cardinals are 2.5 back of the Braves, a game and a half back of the Mets, and tied with the Giants in the wild card race. So getting to the postseason, which at one time looked like, that looked pretty likely, albeit the wild card spot. Now they are going to really have to go off, and they are entering the most difficult portion of their schedule. At the start of the season, perhaps one of the reasons for what I thought was one of the most confusing moves I have seen in my time doing television and radio in St. Louis. Jackson calls it a Hall of Fame career. I agree with him, but I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Yeah, and that's what I've said forever, and I will continue to say.
Thank you. The contract extension to Ali Marmol coming off of the worst finish for the organization in 33 years. Here, let's really irritate the fan base before the season starts. Why are we doing this? Well, we don't want there to be a distraction because the season's going to start off with a tough schedule. As tough as the schedule was to start off then, I think it is tougher once you get done with the Reds, although look at the Reds last night. When you have the Dodgers, you have the Brewers, you have the Yankees, you have the Twins, and I'm not sure who is it, Brewers after the Padres. And then I believe maybe the Brewers after that.
6 against the Brewers left.
6 against the Brewers left. Go 6-0 against the Brewers, Jackson. Cardinals win the National League Central. You put $100 down on it, you win $1,400.
Can't do it.
You cannot do that. Why? You're not liquid enough? The trust fund's locked up?
Not the issue. The issue is how could I light money on fire like that when you can't hit left-handed pitching? Oh, who do you have as right-handed batters? Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado,
Jordan Walker.
You can't hit left. Wilson Contreras. You can't.
Break season.
Right. The only guy who can hit them is Mason Wynn. Like that. Right there. That should be their strength as lefties. Teams should be scared to throw lefties against the Cardinals. You want to yell at the Cardinals, when I'm talking Cardinals, I'm talking front office and management, about player development and not getting young players, especially young pitchers up there. I'm with you. I'll join you on the shouting line. But the overarching issue this year is Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado are shells themselves, and that is it. That is it. How much better is this team? Are they they're probably right there with the Brewers, if not in first place, if Goldschmidt and Arenado have career average seasons.
Jackson, what percentage would you give the Cardinals making the playoffs now? I don't have time for you to hem and haw. We have
9%.
Okay, I don't mind that.
9%. Given the schedule going forward and how they've been playing over the past 3 weeks, I will go 9%.
I will go with 12%. Okay. Either way, if we're operating on the best case scenario being 88% for me and 91% for you, that the Cardinals are not going to make the playoffs, then what do things look like with the organization if it's back-to-back years of disappointment? Ken Rosenthal on his podcast yesterday gave his thoughts, and I think that this answer is going to get emotion going in St. Louis. When you hear it, you will hear it on the other side of the break. This is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN. Welcome back. Balloon Party 101 ESPN. It's driven by Munganess. St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett with you. Jackson, I enjoy Ken Rosenthal's podcast. It's called Fair Territory. And A.J. Przinsky, former Cardinal, 2014, he had foul territory.
Yes.
This is fair territory.
Fair territory.
Ken does this 2 times a week. And he was asked what his thoughts were on the Cardinals and the state of the organization on his podcast yesterday and any changes that could be made. Take a listen to what Ken Rosenthal had to say.
Next question comes from Thomas Gauvain, who asks, what do you think will change for the Cardinals coaching staff, front office, ownership if they have another season without the playoffs and possibly another losing season? It is possible that they will have another losing season. They're only 2 games over 500 right now. They are not currently in playoff position. And yes, there could be changes if they don't make the playoffs. You would expect almost that there would be, right? This would be 2 disappointing seasons in a row. Ownership is not going to change. Bill DeWitt is not going anywhere. The president of baseball operations, John Mozeliak, there is kind of an understanding in baseball circles that he's not going to do this job much longer. Maybe a year, maybe 2. Maybe he steps down after this year, regardless of what happens. I would say that is possible. He's done this a long time. He is one of the longest tenured heads of baseball operations in the game. So they certainly could transition to either Chaim Bloom, who is there right now, or Gersh, who has been there a while in that front office as well. They also could go outside if they decided to make a change. I don't know that Ali Marmol will be in trouble. Remember, they gave him an extension in spring training. And I don't know that you can put this on him. This is a team that probably has come back pretty well considering how it started, and a team that has kind of disappointed in a lot of ways. Their 2 biggest stars, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, have not performed to expectations. So if they miss the playoffs, if they finish below 500, might that change at the top, the head of baseball operations, happen? I would say the chances would be decent, but it's not a sure thing. They value their stability in St. Louis, sometimes to a fault, and I expect that that is going to continue in one form or another.
There you go, Ken Rosenthal. Not necessarily expecting substantial changes. And I think, I think there are a number of things that frustrate the fan base right now. But I think at its core, you have a sense of frustration that the organization is not as committed to winning as the fan base is committed to supporting the team, and so that emotional/financial investment is not reciprocated by the organization. Now, the organization would say, well, we've spent $200 million, considering our market size and our revenue, that actually is consistent with where we should be. But I think to take it to another level and to get off of the DeWallet thing, which I believe is red meat for the public, and I actually think is off. I think where you would have more of a grievance is people don't lose their jobs for underperformance. Yeah. And the one time somebody lost their job, dating back to the Mike Matheny firing of July 2018, was Mike Schilt. And that was for pushing back on some things that the organization did not see as being in line with their philosophical vision for the near and long-term future. In other words, if you don't say yes, then you got to go. But other than that, finish in last place, and you get to stick around. Trade away players who become stars elsewhere, you get to stick around. Miss out on free agents over and over again, you get to stick around. So I think that... Now, it's not as glamorous as calling out a rich guy for not spending his money. Right. That'll always activate the people. But if you want to get into the weeds of the core issues, it's a lack of accountability for failing to do one's job. In addition to that, then you go, okay, I get it. They had a great run of success. Don't want to fire somebody after the first time they don't go to the playoffs going back to 2019. As much as I want to call into question the run of playoffs, because 20 and 21 don't exactly strike me as memorable years around these parts. But I would concede 19 and 22. So you don't just fire a guy in 2023. But when you have another year like that, that certainly brings that into question. And then you especially don't give somebody a contract extension to be manager. I'm not saying Ali Marmol should have been fired, but the contract extension I don't know. I mean, in the last quarter century, a managerial move, and by managerial, I'm talking about an organization's hiring or firing as far as flooring me more than the Ali Marmol contract extension. I don't know if I can find one. I really don't. Yeah. I'm saying that with sincerity.
Yeah, because even Berube or Schultz firing were probably less surprising.
I think that the Schultz firing was super surprising,
given the timing too.
But if you as an organization are going, okay, he's saying this, we're saying this, it isn't going to make sense. We got to part ways. Then okay, then that's what you got to do. But what were we worried about? Ali Marmol hitting the job market in March or after this season?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Like, what can we do to piss off the fan base? It's almost like watching Major League and Rachel Phelps.
Yeah,
what can we do? I don't know. They finished in last place. I know. Let's give him a contract extension. Well, who's somebody that really pissed him off over the last 5 years? Oh, my God, the Matt Carpenter extension. Let's bring him back. Great. Okay, Brandon Crawford. Looks like he put on 30 pounds this offseason. Well, let's sign him. You know, I mean, let's just do a bunch of things to piss people off. That's right. What we've seen here. And for the life of me, I don't get it. And it's a shame because the goodwill that the ownership group and the front office had from 1995 when they bought the team to about 2015, I think was second to none in sports. When you look at the run the Cardinals had, whether it be with success as a team or the McGuire years, and getting a new ballpark and the development in downtown St. Louis when most people were bailing. But over the last, I don't know how many years, the Cardinal equity with the public has decreased exponentially. Your thoughts on the topic, 314-399-9646. And you're also welcome to participate in the YouTube chat. This is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN.
This is Action Jackson with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals lose the opener to the Reds last night. Final score of 6-1. The Cardinals will play the Reds again tonight. 5:40 p.m. the first pitch. Eric Fetty on the mound for the Cardinals. Hunter Green on the mound for the Reds. 5:40 again, that first pitch. And the AP Top 25 for college football in 2024 is out. Georgia number 1, Ohio State number 2, Oregon number 3, and at number 11, the Missouri Tigers. That was another Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Back to Balloon Party 101 ESPN. It's driven by Munganess. St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, Tim McKernan, Jackson, Bennett, Burkett with you on the program. Jackson, we talked about the Blues trade. You really gave us your insight on that.
Yep.
And the Cardinals and what Ken Rosenthal had to say about his expectation of a lack of change this offseason should the Cardinals not make the playoffs with regard to people losing their jobs. This sets the stage for the second half of today's Balloon Party with your questions, which are called what?
Good Pid, Mad City.
Okay, well, if we already visited some of the topics, then pivot to a new one. I mean, you do what you want to do. You're the guy. You're the guy. You wear the C on your sweater. I wear the A. I'm lucky to even have the A on my sweater.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you just heard my Sports Center update, or if you didn't, if you're listening on the Dobbs Tire and Auto Center podcast, Mizzou is the number 11th ranked team going into the 2024 season. The last time Missouri football featured in the preseason AP Top 25 was in 2015 when they ranked number 24. This is the highest preseason ranking for Mizzou since 2008 when they were ranked number 6. Comparing and contrasting that 2008 team to today's, what feels different, if anything at all, and what feels similar? How could you compare the hype of that 08 club to the current Missouri Tiger club? And what was the byproduct of the successful 07 season and the hype of the 08 season? Do you think they capitalized on it?
I'll take the last one first. Just because it's the only one I can remember.
I got you. I'll refresh you.
The 2008 Missouri team had ridiculous expectations, and I think the biggest part of that was you had Chase Daniel and Jeremy Macklin returning, coming off of a season in which they had gotten to number 1 in the country.
Yeah.
And were a win away, a half away against Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship from playing for the national championship. So that was absurd momentum to have both those guys returning. Well, guess what? You have Brady Cook and you have Luther Burden coming back this year. That team, per Gabe DeArmond, the thing that fans and media may have missed, Gabe says, about that team is while there were some big names offensively returning, a lot of the leadership was gone. Not necessarily headline players, but a lot of the leadership left after 2007. And it was highlighted early on in the season where they were kind of fighting with Illinois at the Dome in a game that I don't think was expected to, 52-42. You saw the impact that some of the defensive players who had gone away were having early on. They won 52-42 then they played Southeast in Nevada. I believe Colin Kaepernick, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Columbia. Won that 69-17. Played Buffalo, apparently a regular, so they got that similarity as well.
Hell yeah.
Beat the hell out of Nebraska in Lincoln, and you're thinking, okay, here we go. Home game against Oklahoma State. Wow. That's where it all turned.
Yeah.
And as Gabe says, the season was over at that point, and I went down to Austin to watch them play Texas the next week, and they were blown off the field. The score of 56-31 is not nearly as indicative of how big of a blowout that was. And then that season just flat out got away.
Was that Colt McCoy year for the Longhorns?
It was a Colt McCoy year.
Boy, was he a good college quarterback.
They would wind up losing to Kansas in Arrowhead and then getting stomped by Rams quarterback Sam Bradford.
Yeah, that was bad.
At Big 12 championship, 62-21. And it was a game that, unlike the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma the year before, where you're like, Missouri should win this thing. you go in and going, okay, you know Oklahoma's going to score 1 million points. It's just how many they're going to decide to score, and that's exactly what happened. And they had to win overtime against Northwestern in the Alamo Bowl.
Right, I remember that.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is not what the expectations were. This is different. This is different in the sense that even if you lose early on in the season like they did to Oklahoma State, it doesn't blow up your season. That's the core difference. But there are some similarities, and so it's something that is a fan, but also somebody whose obligation is to give the audience what my honest opinion is. It's something that you tread lightly. Missouri continued to have a run, really. 2012 was a disappointing season, the first year in the SEC, but they were winning seasons for the most part between 2006 and 2014. You didn't have the big drop-off until the mess that was the 2015 season and everything that happened with the hunger strike and Gary Pinkel having to resign because of his cancer diagnosis and then Barry Odom getting hired. That's when you had some dark days. This is different because I think you have people who are not necessarily Missouri fans anxious to watch this team play. And you also have what is a high likelihood of being undefeated going into October. I'm talking about 80%, I think, of being undefeated, if not higher, considering the schedule. And if you have that and you go and win at Texas A&M, barring just a catastrophe, you come home, and the catastrophe would be losing in Amherst, Massachusetts to UMass. You come home to begin a stretch of 2 of 3 home games against Auburn and Oklahoma, and then a road game in the middle against Alabama, and you are set up for being in the college football playoff. If you win 2 of those 3 games, you are in. So, with that all said, it's a different format, which lends itself much differently. Keep in mind, in 2008, there wasn't even the college football playoff.
Right.
So you lose 1 game to Oklahoma State, you're kind of done.
Yep.
At that point, you're kind of done already. You can lose to A&M in early October and still be alive. You could theoretically lose in Alabama and win all the other games and still be in the mix. I just don't think it's a sure thing at 10-2. I think that will be, you'll be relying on some things to get in at 10-2. But with that all established, the enthusiasm level for this program is certainly up there with the last time it was ranked this high, which is 2008 when they were number 6, and now 2024 ranked 11th.
Yeah, I think just based on my age, I always cite that, like, the 06 World Series with the Cardinals was like when I fully got into sports in a major way. And then the following year, my favorite football team that didn't play in the NFL was the Missouri Tigers, and I see them be number 1 in the country. So, like, I obviously have scars watching Mizzou sports, but more so on the hardwood than I do gridiron. So I didn't go through some of the stuff in the 90s where, Mizzou always rips your heart out. In my mind, Mizzou was number 1 in the country when I was a child. So, like, I always had these, some might call it delusions of grandeur, but I think it's like they've shown that it's possible. And then 2013 and 14, they're a game away. 14 a little less so. But 13, certainly a game away from having a chance at it. So, like, I think I view it through a different lens than maybe some older Missouri fans. But given the hype going into this year, I think it's safe to say that, a lot of guys didn't come back, and certainly a coordinator didn't come back. However, your main stars are coming back, and the schedule's favorable, and the expanded playoff. The hype is real, and it should be. There should be expectations on this team, and that is how it should be going forward. Totally going forward.
The key is to sustain it.
Yeah.
So what happened in 2007 was incredible. Walking out of Arrowhead Stadium with Missouri fans chanting, "We're number 1," and it not being satirical is one of my favorite sports memories. But unfortunately, they didn't sustain it. And this is an opportunity, especially on this side of the state, to become the football team people pull for year-round. Now, don't get me wrong. It's never going to be as universal as having an NFL team or an MLB team or an NHL team where the vast majority of the population's pulling for you. If people who didn't go to school there, people don't like Missouri fans, people are Illinois fans, people are St. Louis University fans. I understand all that, and I don't have that. God bless, to each their own. But if you're looking for a football team and you have an SEC team who is in the mix for the national championship, that then cultivates fandom for a lifetime, whether you went to school there or decide to go to school there or elsewhere. So what that presents as an opportunity, you got to capitalize on it. The other thing, and even though I know some Missouri fans are hypersensitive about this, but relative to SEC schedules, this is an easy SEC schedule, at least as far as what it looks like it's going to be. Maybe it'll wind up being incredibly difficult.
Right.
Who knows? But it is the easiest ranked schedule at this moment in the SEC of all of the teams. And you don't always get these. Next year, if I'm not mistaken, Missouri has both Georgia and Alabama,
Yep.
I believe, in Athens and at home against Tuscaloosa.
Right.
Hello again, everybody.
Yeah.
That's already different.
Yep.
And I think they're supposed to play Kansas and Illinois.
Yes, next year starts the contract with Kansas and Illinois.
So, I mean,
Kansas certainly on the upswing, and Illinois is just like any Big Ten school year by year.
You got to capitalize. And if you can carry that momentum over and get into the college football playoff, then you've got buzz going into
Bingo.
the following year.
Yep.
So that is how you build a program. You don't build a program in 1 year. The 1 year is required to lay the foundation. But in order to sustain it, you got to have multiple years of it. And that's why this is so critical. Your thoughts on the topic? You are welcome to text in the Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646 and participate in the YouTube chat on 101 ESPN YouTube channel. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett with you. This is Balloon Party on 101 ESPN. Munganess, St. Louis Acura, Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota, online at stlouisacura.com and altontoyota.com. If you are looking for new cars, go shopping right now at stlouisacura.com or altontoyota.com. And if you're looking for pre-owned cars, you can do the same thing. Go to stlouisacura.com or altontoyota.com. And if you have questions or requests for the people at Munganess who are in charge, such as Jamie Burkhardt and Peter Munganess, they set up a number specific for our audience to call or text with those questions. The number is 314-252-0029. That's 314-252-0029. 0029. Call or text and ask any question you may have to get a direct answer from the people in charge. Plus, if you didn't get your car from Munganess, that's no problem. You can still get your car serviced at Munganess. Ryan Seiberg in the service department will take great care of you. It's Munganess, St. Louis Acura, and Munganess, Burkhardt, Alton Toyota online at stlouisacura.com and altontoyota.com. Welcome back to Boom Party 101 ESPN. Tim McKernan, Jackson Burkett. This is like the end of Around the Horn when we clean up mistakes. Missouri does not play Illinois next year, Jackson. They play Kansas next year, but the following year they play both. They're scheduled to anyway play both Kansas and Illinois.
Right.
They open up against Central Arkansas next year at home. Then they have a home game against Rock Chalk Jayhawk. And then the dates that are set are October 4th for Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, not Brian Kelly's dry humping recruits team, and UMass, the Minutemen, Saturday, October 18th. So it's fun. You get a chance to see UMass back-to-back years. You also get a chance to see Alabama next year. So they do not play Georgia next year. You just flip the home and road. At least that's what it's set up to be right now. You never know what's going to happen with these conferences and changing and so on and so forth.
Yeah, they have
Georgia either next year.
Right.
Errors and omissions.
Errors and omissions. Yeah, so the plan for Illinois Mizzou football is to play games alternating between Champaign, Columbia in 2026 through 2029, then resume again in 2032 through 2035.
There you go.
Which I love. I remember a play at the Dome, Mizzou taking on Illinois, where William Moore had an interception where he took the ball out of the hands of the Illinois receiver as he caught it and then turned and ran the other direction. And at that moment, I said to myself, that's a damn good football player. William Moore. Decent little career with the Falcons.
Yeah, he was with the Falcons.
Sean Witherspoon as well.
10:53 in St. Louis. Time Chalk brought to you by Clarkson Jewelers. Jackson Burkett, Tim McKernan with you. BK and Ferrario coming up at 11 o'clock. Jeremy Rutherford will join them on the Blues and the offer sheet. Going to Broberg and Holloway with the Oilers. As Doug Armstrong pulled it off, we will find out what JR has to say. The Oilers with 7 days to match the offer sheet. JR coming up on BK and Ferrario. Earlier in the program, we of course talked about the Cardinals, the debacle last night in Cincinnati, the state of the union, which is not strong at this moment. 7.5 games back of the Brewers and falling precipitously with regard to the third wild card spot. They're 6.5 back of the Padres and the Diamondbacks, and they're now 2.5 back of the Braves. The issue there is that the Mets are in between them and the Braves, and the Giants are tied with them, and the Cubs and the Reds are now lurking as well for this one playoff spot, which mathematically is the one that is the only one that is real likely at this point. By the way, if you like the Cardinals to win the division, put $100 on it, and you receive $1,400 when they win the division. Okay?
Okay.
You're going to do it.
No, I mean, you'd be banking on a switch to flip that you have no time. You don't have time for like guys to slowly get back into it.
Jordan Walker switch.
Jordan Walker would be a huge addition, but like this team cannot be truly successful and make a run if Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt are a little bit above nothing, because that's kind of, I mean, you look at their wars, that's kind of what they've been. I mean, Arenado a little less so, but I don't see a world in which they can be truly successful unless those guys are kind of clicking. And so at this point, now that we're in mid-August, it's going to need to be a switch flip. And hey, these guys are world-class baseball players, maybe even Hall of Famers. So that's certainly possible, but I wouldn't bank on it, certainly wouldn't bet on it. And given the schedule, I just couldn't do that with confidence, Tim. But I'll be rooting hard for the Redbirds. I just don't know if it's going to be there.
There it is, Jackson Burkett. All right, Jackson, what's our next question?
When evaluating baseball criticism over the years, has blame or frustration with a team's performance shifted from manager to GM during your lifetime or vice versa? If there has been a shift.
What a question. Another Jackson Star question at 10:56.
Yeah, if there has been a shift, what can you identify as a key reason?
Wow. This is a podcast. That's a podcast. It absolutely has locally. Mm-hmm. I get the sense in New York with the Yankees, they don't like Cashman.
Yeah, and because Steinbrenner was such a larger-than-life character, they've always had a pretty good awareness of the front office.
I'll give you a theory. I say yes. Okay. I don't know if this is the case in other markets. Do you think that the answer is yes?
I think that from what I've seen, but again, I have a limited worldview given I'm only 26, but it seems like GMs are getting a lot more blame than managers, and maybe I'm probably right, but either way.
I would say that the reason is because the game has shifted from managers making moves, what seemed to the public.
Right.
And I hate the use of the word seemed, but what the public was thought to be their own discretion. Mm-hmm. And now it's the belief that, with the exception of maybe a couple of them, one of whom just won a World Series in Arlington, Texas last year, they're essentially puppets on strings of front offices who are run by people who really didn't play the game. And I think fans have a tough time with that. So I think that if you have the math nerds put in charge over people who actually played the game, I think for a lot of people that's a tough pill to swallow. So I think that would be the core reason.
Right. And if you were the timeline that you could equate that to the Oakland A's and 02 or wherever you want to cite it. But yeah, I think the elimination of the DH, elimination of pitchers hitting across baseball has certainly taken a lot of
The strategy on the National League side away, yes.
Yeah. Which was a manager's, if you're talking about like autonomy on the manager's side, that was a big part of it.
I'll go as far as to say this, Jackson, and maybe this is a take. Clip this off and see if we can get some engagement on social media, and that'll lead to exactly $0 more in my account.
Right, but you'll sleep easier.
Oh, if I had some likes. The Cardinals don't win the World Series if the National League doesn't have the DH in 2011.
Ooh.
All day long.
Really?
They were an inch away from losing it anyway,
right.
But yeah, there was a distinct advantage in the moment watching Ron Washington trying to figure out how to manage in St. Louis, where they lost 3 or 4 games, and if it weren't for a blown save in the 9th in Game 2, they would have lost all 4 games, and who knows if they would have had to play all 4 games. But again, I recognize when I sit here and I talk about not really caring for interleague play, not liking 12 teams getting into the playoffs, not liking the DH, that I am old school baseball guy, and I know that I'm in the minority. But that is where I am, because one of the reasons I loved baseball is the pace allowed for conversation regarding strategy. And that's not to say that I don't like the pace of football. My God, I couldn't love college football anymore. I don't love the pace of hockey. Couldn't love the Stanley Cup playoffs anymore. And I know you love the game of basketball.
Sure do.
But as far as the pacing of baseball allowing for strategy and second guessing in the moment, not after it takes place, I loved that, and I feel like a lot of the strategy has been taken away, and I certainly feel like the value of the regular season has been diminished extensively by allowing 12 teams into the playoffs. And I think it rewards a great season even less for a team that is dominant during the marathon. So I think that may play a role in why people focus on the general managers and front offices more so than the managers. All right, it's 11 o'clock. We got to go. BK and Ferrari are coming up next. JR will be on at 12:15 on Doug Armstrong's move with the Oilers, and then in turn with the Penguins swap and draft picks. That's coming up here over the next 3 hours. Then you have the Fast Lane from 2 to 6. For Jackson Bennett Burkett, I'm Tim McKernan. This has been Balloon Party, driven by Munganass, St. Louis Acura, and Munganass Burkhardt Alton Toyota on 101 ESPN and the 101 ESPN YouTube channel.